scissor here. It's going.
And I'm really pissed off now. My scissors going. Weird. Scissor. Scissor. Quand je suis venue, l'autre m'avait dit, oui, il y a toujours un peu de café, un peu de thé. Peut-être si je parlais en français, ça serait mieux. Parce qu'il va falloir que je parle. Okay, she said, I'll let you know. She said, are you Sorry, I wasn't aware. I was actually just did this hilarious drawing on the back of a canvas while sitting here, and I like the sound that it made because it was like the sound of our relationship, like somebody like because I was thinking about my past relationships. I was thinking about the 6 abortions that I had with 6 different men. Actually, it was with 5 different men, and one of them, the first one, I think were twins. And I was thinking about it because I actually do a lot of drawings about it. My unconscious, I guess, is still trying to process it, 20 years later. I do a lot of distortions of women's bodies and distended bodies. And sometimes there's little fetus on the side or coming out. And I think I can't believe that I'm still, I don't know, somehow working that through. I think I was really blessed that I was able to have 2 boys that came to full birth, full term. So I think on some level the soul of the others maybe came through one of these boys or went on somewhere else. But I think it's something that we don't talk about, abortion's really pretty much a new technique, maybe 100 years old. And it's always been something that is unpleasant, heard of, but untalked about. And so I thought, since I keep on drawing about it, it might be an interesting thing to review it. My first relationship, I was 19. He was Nigerian. His name was Rufus. We lived in London in a flat together. And that's where I think I had the twins. I'm convinced of it. He was from the Yoruba culture, and in the Yoruba tradition, the twins are like the holiest of holiest kind of babies that you can have. You're really blessed. And somehow I think I was really blessed. I was 19, I was a dancer, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember I said to him, look, I can't have these babies. And he said, well, why not? Why not have my mom raise them? And you can, have them in Nigeria and my mom will raise them. I said, I can't leave my children with your mother who I've never even met. It sounds really great, but I don't think it's, maybe you do that in Africa, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And I remember calling my parents from the abortion clinic and telling them, I'm going to go through with having this abortion. I'm pregnant. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm at this clinic and I'm going to have this abortion. And they said, well, that's the right thing to do. And I wondered always if had they not given me that permission, would I have done it? I think that life became so convenient, so easy to just, exercise a woman's right to not have children, that I became too cavalier about it. I think spiritually it's something that still gnaws at me in some place, and I think sometimes, wow, imagine if I had 5 more Sasha and Maxes, a girl version or a male version, or how different my life would have been. I still think that at 19 I wasn't ready to have children, and I may have, there's so much in my life I would not have done had I had those twins. Imagine if it was twins, which I think. So I'm really grateful that I was able to live in this time period where I could make choice, but I still think it was somehow a bit of an unconscious choice. I still think maybe I hadn't weighed all my options. Years later, I talked to a woman who was 50, who was just finding her daughter 25 years later that she was forced to give up in adoption because she was Catholic. And I thought, wow, what if my parents had said, why don't you put those babies up for adoption? Or maybe if I had listened to Rufus and said, okay, have your mom raise them. You know, what would that have been like to walk back into a child's life after 25 years? I think I didn't know that option really existed for me. I just wasn't aware of it. Because, again, these were not things that were discussed. They discussed birth control. They said that withdrawal method works, but it's not foolproof. But it doesn't really work. The withdrawal method doesn't work. I think that's, you know, either a condom broke or it was a withdrawal method every time. And that was 5 times too many, you know. And it's kind of amazing to think that in 20 years, I guess every 5 years I had a child, or could have had a child. And I was really, really fertile, but and I think of all the women now who are age 40 and over and would love to have children and they can't, and how they miss that whole natural opportunity that most, you know, most women can have. And I feel so blessed that, like, I was able to finally see a pregnancy to full term when I was somewhat more mature. I'm still not sure I had the children in the best of circumstances. I mean, being married, I suppose, was important, although it's not like you have bastard children anymore like it used to be if you weren't married. And there's so many single moms just having babies, and single dads, you know, just gay men. I think my second child that I had conceived, I had some crazy boyfriend. I was in New York, and his name was JC. He was Jewish, but he had a name like Jesus Christ. I mean, and he was a reporter, and he was a journalist, and, well, I don't know, the condom broke one night, and I just remember going to the cash machine to get the money to have an abortion because I realized, I don't know, he just seemed really irresponsible. I wasn't sure if I was in love with him or not. And, you know, he wasn't ready for any kind of commitment, so it just seemed like the right thing to do at that time. And it was pretty, it was a lot less painful than the first time. The first time I went under a general anesthesia, which is where, because I was further along, it was 4 months, and I didn't feel anything. I was completely knocked out, but I woke up screaming in London in this ward that I had gone to, where other girls from Spain had flown in, and Ireland, and all these places where abortion was still illegal. They came to London to have a legal abortion. They came with their mothers, they came with their sister. I was one of the few people alone. I mean, my boyfriend was nearby, but it was a very bizarre, white, sterile experience, and I felt completely taken out of society for like a moment in time while I was going to do this thing. And I woke up screaming because I think my body had had a shock from not having the children, you know, being taken out after 4 months. And the nurse started yelling at me, saying, "Oh, quiet down now, you Americans are all the same, you're all hysterical, it's all over, just stop it right now." I mean, and she was just rude and very offended that I was having any feelings or any emotion or any reaction, for that matter. That was very strange. And so the second abortion was in the United States, and it was just at one doctor's office. He was very warm. He was American, was on my territory. I think I was only about a month and a half pregnant, maybe 2 months, so it wasn't as dramatic. Physically, there was less of a fetus to take out. So I didn't have to go under general. It was a local anesthetic, so it just felt like a vacuum cleaner goes in, goes out, and that was. And the third one was, that I started to finally have a little bit more of a serious boyfriend. I think I was 24 at the time, and it was kind of like puppy love, and he and he was Italian Catholic from Rome. Well, actually from Santino. Ready? Santino, the Roman Venetian Italian Catholic, who was very charming, but and who had once told me that he had a girlfriend when he was, I don't know, maybe 18, and she had an abortion, and he couldn't go through with. After she had it, he just left her. It was just devastating for him. So when I found out I was pregnant, this time I think it was withdrawal or the condom broke. It was one or the other. I was really petrified because I thought he's definitely going to leave me because that's what his pattern is. And I think I told my mom, and she said, just have the abortion and don't tell him or you'll lose him. And I thought, no, I couldn't go through with lying to him. That wouldn't, or just knowing that it would be, I wouldn't want to deceive him with something like that. That's so big in a relationship. And so I decided that I was going to tell him that, I really wanted to have an abortion, but that I was just afraid that if I did, he'd leave me and he'd do exactly what he did to that other girl, he'd do to me. And he said, no, I won't do that if that's what you really want to do. He said, but, if you want, we can go to Jamaica, we can get married, and we can have this baby. And I said, no, I'm too young to get married. I'm 24. I'm an actress in New York City. I want to have a big career, and well, this doesn't fit into my plans. And what would I do with the baby? I mean, I'm not ready to be married. I love you, but that's just too much commitment right now. That sounded too scary. And I didn't want to elope and go to Jamaica. That wasn't my idea of a grand wedding. So I decided to have the abortion somewhere on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. Again, at another doctor's office. Actually, this was a clinic. And afterwards I developed a really high fever. It was a very simple, clean, again, it was like maybe a month, 2 months, quick operation, local anesthetic. He came, picked me up, took me home, and then I developed a really high fever. So we didn't know what to do. So he called his friend Carlo Buletti, who was at the time at Columbia University doing some of the only research on utero. This was pre-in vitro, and he was doing this kind of fertility studies. And so he came over to the house at about 11 p.m. and he checked me, and he said, yeah, you've got a very high fever, take this medicine, see if you get better, you should be okay. And I was a bit traumatized, but I stayed in bed for about 3 days. And during that time, of course, Santino freaked out and ended up having some affair with some Italian woman that just came into town that had just had a divorce. So I proceeded to just throw all of his clothes out onto the streets of New York City on Waverly Street. And I realized it was going to be like goodbye. That was it. And I just walked out because it was like there was no turning back. on that relationship. And it reminds me that I didn't talk about the first one, the first relationship, Rufus. In the end, what happened was he was pretty devastated. He was so angry inside, even though he said, do what you have to do. It's your body. If you don't want my mother to raise it, okay, I'll take you for the abortion. And he did come and pick me up, but it was like this, both of them, there was like this feeling of complete helplessness and despair. And it was like there was no turning back. There was no going back into the relationship. It was like I broke their hearts. I guess they were both, on some level very traditional men. And I wasn't traditional. But I think I didn't see how traditional they were because they were from another culture. And so therefore they seemed exotic, or they seemed adventurous. Here they were being with an American woman living in America. So, but it's almost as if that was a veneer, for me not to see how conservative they were, or traditional. And the second one, JC, he was pretty okay about have the abortion, not have the abortion, stay together. I think our relationship kind of had just come to its own end, so that it wasn't the abortion that really ended it. And we stayed friends. I could probably Google him and find him today and call him up and say hello. I know he eventually ended up marrying someone and having some kids. I think having the kids first and then marrying her. But the fourth relationship, I think, was that where I had the abortion. That was really traumatic, actually, and weird. It was this. I met this guy from Tibet, this Tibetan guy, and I think we were together, like, we just met, and he really wanted to sleep with me, and for some reason I decided, okay, so we went to this hotel, like some sleazy hotel on 42nd Street, and I told him, you have to pull out because I don't have any birth control. This was like this was someone who I didn't have a relationship with, all these other guys. And he didn't pull out. And I should have gone and got the morning after pill the next day, which actually I did once before. I didn't talk about it, actually, but I did. So that's maybe even would be like a sixth abortion. That would be the sixth abortion that I would have had, but didn't have to have because I took that morning after pill. Anyway, so, but I wasn't sure if I got pregnant. Guys have come inside of you before and you don't get pregnant. Well, I got pregnant. And it was almost like being raped because it was like he didn't listen. I mean, everyone else was in a relationship with me, so if I said, you have to pull out, they said fine, and there was no question that somebody wasn't going to try to have a child with me if I didn't want one. And so I almost thought like maybe he was trying to find a wife and get married and become a citizen, or like in some underhanded way or something. Anyway, a month later or so, I figured it out, and I went by myself because I never saw that guy again. The whole experience, I was just so turned off that he would come inside of me after discussing that, no, it's okay, I won't, don't worry. I'm amazed also that I had the same amount of trust with him as these other men that I was living with for a year. It's kind of crazy. I don't know why it's weird. I don't know why I had that. Obviously bad judgment. So, in this case, this would have been like definitely like if I had had some half Tibetan child where I didn't really even know the father, would have been a nightmare, would have been a disaster. So, you know, it's at those moments when you say women's reproductive rights are super important. Just what a trauma that would have been. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was one more time, and that was on some spiritual retreat with the Rainbow Tribe in Arizona, at doing the Turkey Dance weekend of transformation with living in teepees for the weekend. And I met this guy who was really funny and smart, and he was pretty successful. He was in computers, and we spent the night, and the condom broke. And and I said to him, you know, I'm getting older now. I think I was already in my 30s. Maybe I was 35, 34, 36, something. And he said, you know, if I get pregnant, I'm going to have this baby. And he said, that's okay, you know, you can. And, you know, you let me know if you want me to help you with it or not. But I was, you know, it was a mistake. It wasn't like he was trying to do something to me that he didn't, you know, do. We had an agreement that, I mean, we were going to sleep together. He had protection, and there was no betrayal. It just was an accident. It was like an accident with a stranger. And and then I called him. I realized, I thought, well, I don't know this guy. I don't want to have this baby. What if I don't really like him? You know, maybe he seems a little hyperactive. I mean, probably a genius. Maybe I'll have a problematic kid. And I realized I couldn't have this baby because I wasn't in love with this guy. I didn't know him. And so I called him and I said, I just want to let you know that I was pregnant, and I'm going to have an abortion. And, you know, he said, well, do you want me to help you pay for it? And I said, no, I think I'm okay. But he said, I thought you really wanted to have the child. And I said, you know what, I did, but then I realized I don't know you well enough. And he said, okay. I mean, he was totally cool. And I ended up going and kind of being really embarrassed that, like, this was the 5th time, and how could I have done this to myself 5 times? And, you know, it was with someone who I didn't know, and someone who certainly I wasn't in love with, and how crazy I gave myself a really hard time psychologically, because I felt like, you know, by now I should have known better, or I should know better. And then the next time I got pregnant, it was with someone that I was madly, madly in love with, and really wanted to have a child with, and thought I really wanted to build a life with. And it was the greatest joy. And it's such a different thing to talk about abortion and conception and birth. I never thought I'd be talking about birth, or talking about conception that had a plan, conception with a plan. And then here's one of my paintings. It says conception with an angel, because I just felt like he was an angel, and I felt like I was floating, and I felt so ecstatic that I was going to have this baby. And I wrote this little piece here in this one called The Love of Labor and Water, and it says, birth and conception are 2 of the holiest moments in my life. I've never said that out loud, yet it's true. My heart was held and blessed to be able to conceive. The first child, Sasha, was conceived somewhere in the heat of a little tent under the Uruguayan sky on an overnight sailing trip across the Rio Plata, which comes from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Montevideo and Riachuela, Uruguay. it was undying love and devotion for one another that we conceived this child, with dreams deeply touching the flesh we wore to cover our spirits. And this was many hours of labor. And I did it in water, most of it, because I had done the Lamaze and method. Yeah, once I had this student who was from the Christian right, and I mean, she was an ardent Christian, and she was very involved at this center.
So, cut it. Take two.
Okay. Actually, once I had this student in Miami at the university, and she was an ardent Christian, and she was very involved with the Christian right, and she had a good friend that worked at this organization that helped young women have their babies. They would find them homes, they would give them extra money, they would do everything to, try to teach them, have this child, you can do it, don't betray God. You need to accept that God is ready for you to move into motherhood and take more responsibility in your life. And I saw actually films about this. She told me about them, and she had films, and then there was ways of teaching women, the responsibilities of being a mother, and I suddenly realized, there's nothing like this for women who go through abortions. There's no classes to go to on how to deal with this loss and this grief. The only thing I did encounter was my own therapy. I had therapists that said, listen, you need to name each child or each fetus that you lost, and you need to maybe write a monologue to each one, talk to it, and then bless it and say goodbye, and realize that it goes somewhere up in ethers, and that if maybe at some point it may come back through your body in some other kind of incarnation or manifestation. And that was very helpful, and that was very it was important work to do. I think that even though sometimes in my drawings it still comes up that it looks like women are having abortions, or all sorts of strange things are going on. I feel like I absolved myself of this terrible sin or this terrible guilt that you feel, because you say, my life is more important than this fetus that isn't born, and I need to become educated, I need to finish my PhD, I need to have a career before I'm going to raise children in the world so that they're stable, and that I'm not depending on other people to feed me and clothe me like some of these girls did with the Christian right. But it was very, I had never met anyone who felt so strongly that God had chosen us to have our child, and it was like our spiritual responsibility to have children, and maybe I should go and visit these people. I mean, she did such a sales job even on me, like I should go visit them and talk with them, because they also helped you process loss, because they realized it was traumatic. And I thought, maybe I should just go meet with these people. I never did, but only because I wanted to then bring it to the women who had abortions, and kind of some of the work that I did with my therapist, what happens right after you have an abortion, and how can you, work with that emptiness in your stomach? How can you name it? How do you pass it on for other generations? Talk about it to other women so that you're not ashamed or feeling somehow very sterile and thrown apart to the side. Whereas, you know, in the Christian right, they had a whole organization and there's all these people around that are supporting the young girls. And I thought, wow, if I had found that when I was young, you know, who knows, I might have had this child or had one of these 5 children. I mean, just because of that kind of support.
So how do you conciliate Christian rights with the women's right?
Well, you know, the Christian right are extremely oppressive to women, and they are, you know, feeding these young girls this idea of like, well, motherhood is the thing and God's choosing you, but they're not giving the women any other options, you know, like, hey, you need to finish your education maybe before you have a baby, or hey, don't you think it's important you might choose a father for this child that you know, that you can live with, so that you might have a more rich and fulfilling life with a husband and children who have a home with a, you know, a mom and a dad. So I'm not sure if I know how to answer your question, except that it doesn't really they don't jive. But I was just noticing how, you know, women's rights organizations, Planned Parenthood helps women to get abortions, but they don't really have support groups about what happens after the abortion. I mean, I'm actually surprised. Like, you'd think that there would, maybe there are now, and I just haven't had an abortion in 15 years, you know. So I'm talking, you know, that there's like a collective of women that feel like, hey, if I'm going to have an abortion, I know where to go. I can do these exercises of, you know, blessing the children, or taking flowers to an imaginary grave, or a stone that I say is for the, you know, so you feel like you bury the child, or, you know, that there's not more ritual created around abortion. I mean, I think now in some of the young, there's a lot of work done with teenagers who are the ones that have most of these unwanted pregnancies. I mean, certainly I started in my teens when I was 19, and there is more ritual around how to work with what happens and to kind of minimize the horror or the isolation. The truth is, I'm not that familiar with that work. But
ritual means sacred. I mean, are we ready to accept that abortion could be sacred?
Well, I think that a woman's choice is sacred. You know, your choice to have your life develop perhaps more, I don't want to say more deeply, but just, you know, have more opportunities available because you're not tied down to having a child so young. That's a sacred choice. You know, it's a, you know, a choice about your life, your own life as well as a fetus's life. You know, either one is a sacred choice. It's not really an either or. It's not like choosing the child sacred, choosing your life is not sacred. You know.
Okay.
It's raising. So I